everyone envied Marina. At first glance, she had the life that millions of women dream of. A brilliant, attractive, respected husband. A famous surgeon, admired by his colleagues, wealthy, elegant, charismatic. A luxurious apartment in an upscale building. A perfect wardrobe. No need to work, no money worries. In the eyes of the world, it was a modern fairy tale. The kind of life you show off with a smile on social media, making others sigh and think, she really hit the jackpot. But no one saw what happened when the door closed. No one heard the contempt in his voice. No one saw the way he looked at her, as if she weren't a wife, but a decorative object to be judged, moved, corrected. No one knew that behind the lavish bouquets, the refined dinners, and the public compliments, there was a prison, a gilded cage. And in that cage, Marina faded away a little more each day. It always started with little details. A coffee not good enough, a dress that didn't suit, a dull hairstyle, a gaze too empty, a friend who was a bad influence, a kilo too many, a misplaced remark, a breath at the wrong moment. Over time, these details became a method, a strategy, a slow and methodical way to break her without leaving any visible marks. Her husband, Stas, was one of those men everyone admired, a man who saved lives at the hospital and destroyed his wife's at home. In public, he would gently caress her cheek. In private, the same gesture became an act of control. He knew exactly how to speak to belittle her without ever raising his voice in front of witnesses. He was the perfect man to the outside world and the perfect tormentor in private. To her friends, Marina was privileged. They looked at her with envy. They told her she was lucky, that a man like him, handsome, cultured, wealthy, seemingly faithful, was rare. They didn't understand why she sometimes seemed absent, why her smile looked so tired, why her eyes were often lost in emptiness. They didn't know that Marina no longer had any money of her own, no social circle of her own, no choices of her own. Even her clothes had to be approved by him. Even her shopping went through him. Even her inner life seemed to have been confiscated. Yet, in the past, Marina was not this silent and submissive woman. She had been a promising young artist, a painter, a girl who dreamed of Paris, of galleries, of exhibitions, of colors, of freedom. Her teachers predicted a future for her. Her watercolors moved those who saw them. She had talent, sensitivity, a rare light within her. Then Stas came into her life with his absolute confidence, his impeccable elegance, his effortless way of making everything beautiful. He seduced her the way one constructs a perfect illusion. He told her she wasn't made for odd jobs, nor for poorly paid commissions, nor for the exhaustion of ordinary life. He promised her a life worthy of her talent. He told her, just stay close to me, I'll take care of the rest, and she believed him. That's how dreams sometimes die. Not with noise, not with immediate drama, but in comfort, in seduction, in the promise of being protected. Marina left her studies almost at the end. She put away her brushes, her canvases, her ambitions. She thought she was entering a great love story. In reality, she was entering a system of control. The first 2 years had seemed like perfect happiness. Then the comments started, then the prohibitions disguised as advice, then the isolation, then the control of money, then the shame, then the fear. And one day, without knowing exactly when, Marina realized that she was no longer living with a husband, but with a man who needed to make her feel small in order to feel powerful. The most terrible thing is that victims of control don't realize it right away. They adapt, they negotiate with the suffering, they hope that it will pass. They tell themselves they're exaggerating, that he's stressed, that he loves them in his own way, that they need to try harder. Marina thought that way too. Until the day when something, or rather someone, burst into her life. In their building lived an old man whom everyone avoided. A solitary, austere, hunched neighbor, always shut away in his apartment. They called him the professor. Some said he had once been a great intellectual, a theater specialist. Others said he had lost his mind after a family tragedy. Still others whispered that he was responsible for the death of his wife and son. In this kind of upscale building, gossip spreads quickly, and the truth often disappears beneath appearances. The old neighbor had become a dark legend, a man people avoided looking at in the elevator. One day, as Marina was taking out the trash, one of the bags tore open on the landing. The garbage spilled onto the floor. Ashamed, her face red with embarrassment, she knelt down to hurriedly pick everything up. It was at that moment that the neighbor's door opened. She expected a cold remark, contempt, an annoyed sigh, but he said nothing. He went back into his apartment, returned with a new bag, a dustpan and a brush, then helped her clean up in silence, without a smile, without a hint of condescension. Just simple, direct help, almost gruff but sincere. This tiny gesture moved Marina more than she would have imagined, because there was something in it she hadn't received in a long time: respect. No theatrics, no lectures, no control, just help. That very evening, Stas had watched the scene through the peephole and flew into a rage. He strictly forbade her from speaking to that man. He called her reckless. He told her that this neighbor was dangerous, unstable, almost a murderer. He lost his temper and squeezed her arm so hard that a bruise appeared. It was the first visible mark, the first bruise, the first boundary crossed irreversibly. That night, Marina did not sleep. Something had shifted inside her. Of course, there was the pain, the humiliation, the fear. But there was also something else, a cold anger, a spark, a new sensation. Maybe what she was experiencing wasn't normal. Maybe the man who was presented to her as exceptional was nothing more than a well-dressed tyrant. The next morning, while Stas had gone to work as if nothing had happened, Marina did something she would never have dared to do before. She filled a thermos with broth, took some painkillers, crossed the landing, and rang the old neighbor's doorbell. When he opened the door, he looked exhausted, ill, almost physically broken. She handed him the thermos with a trembling hand, awkwardly explaining that she had heard he wasn't doing well. He stared at her for a long moment, then managed a sort of bitter smile and let her in. His apartment seemed to belong to another era. Entire walls covered with books, a smell of dust, ink, medicine, and silence. An immense solitude, but also an unbroken dignity. He lived in the kind of clutter typical of a cultured old man, not in the madness the neighbors described. He simply suffered from pain, from old age, and from a heavy past. That day, he said something to her that cut through her like a blade. "Look at yourself in a mirror. I'm not the one who needs help the most." He had seen her bruises. He hadn't needed any explanations. From that moment on, Marina began to visit him regularly. At first to help him, then to talk, then just to breathe. Little by little, this old man whom everyone feared became the only reassuring presence in her life. He didn't treat her like a beautiful object. He didn't cut her off from her thoughts. He listened to her. He talked to her about art, theater, literature, the old city, memory, destiny. He was interested in what she thought. When she showed him old sketches, forgotten watercolors, he looked at them with an almost sacred attention and said to her, "You have a gift. Burying your gift is a form of death." This sentence awakened something in her. A part of Marina she thought was gone. The artist, the free woman, the living woman. But tyrants always sense when their prey is slipping away from them. Stas quickly noticed that something was changing. Her gaze became less submissive. Her silence was no longer the same. Her soul began to resist him. So he tightened his grip. He checked her phone. He monitored her outings. He provoked scenes. He accused her of ridiculing him in the building. He claimed that the neighbors were talking about her. Then the violence escalated. More direct, more brutal. One evening, he caught her coming out of the professor's place. On the landing, he screamed. Then, inside the apartment, he went from words to hands around her neck. The next morning, like so many violent men, he played the part of the repentant, her favorite croissant, apologies, kisses on her hands, promises, exhaustion, the stress of the hospital, so-called love. This is how control works. The wound, then the soothing, then the illusion of a return to normal. Many stay because of this cycle, because they want to believe that the tender man still exists, because they are afraid, because they have nothing, because they have been made to believe they are nothing. But for Marina, something had definitively shifted. It was no longer just suffering, it was clarity.